Hi, I'm Ed, co-founder and CEO at Bud. With AI, it's kind of crazy hype right now. Like with AI in financial services, there's a lot of different types of like ML and neural nets that have been deployed for years in financial services. Obviously, call out R, transaction enrichment, which is a language model we built in 2018. And so it's kind of this interesting place where the buzz is really around generative AI, but like all the other AI use cases kind of get brought along with that, which is great. I mean, there's a few different ways it can be used. Obviously, there's a core insight piece, which we're really focused on, personalization, automatic segmentation, and really within the bank, I think almost that's the biggest opportunity for disruption from AI, because there's so many kind of workflows and processes that if you think about a bank, what is it? It's like really about numbers, and that's what these AI systems are pretty good at processing. And then from the generative UI perspective, just taking a lot of that knowledge work and just optimizing it. We've built this data analyst product, which essentially does a lot of the data analyst work for the bank. And so it's really just trying to get people happy with the idea that these types of tools are additive to their workflows. Like we haven't seen this sort of like mass sort of layoff, everyone's going to lose their jobs. I think it's all about like figuring out what you do and how to best leverage AI. And so I think the lending use case, maybe not the best one for generative AI, but lots of different AI systems, making sure that you can teach a machine to understand a customer better and make a better decision. And there's lots of different models that are used within that, but only really ones that are kind of like auditable and you can understand, like the policies are in place. So really like it's the best tool for the best product, but I think we're gonna see a few different cool things come around. It's really worth talking about the difference between like agents and agentic, and I think the big leap is going to be in that agentic piece. The reason for that is like when you talk about an agentic model, that is something that can like perform general purpose actions on behalf of either customers or of, as I talked about before, within the bank. So let's use like an example, right? So when we think about our finances, and anyone that's worked in the financial or customer financial services industry for a long time knows the biggest problem is kind of like apathy around financial products, and customers tend to be quite sticky to products that might not be as beneficial to them. So with agentic banking, like the real opportunity is to think about a world in which an AI system is looking for opportunities within your finances to optimize, and then presenting you with some options like here's a better mortgage for you based off of the data we see in the market. Here's maybe a better credit card or a different FX provider. And like a lot of customers are aware those products exist, but what happens is customers don't necessarily go, okay, cool, I'm gonna go sign up to a product. It's like a lot of hard work and a lot of effort. Whereas agentic models can actually do that hard admin lifting for individuals. And so what we're sort of calling out to banks is like, should really be thinking about a world in which that exists. We've started to build some of our first agentic models. And so like that is coming, and it really should change the kind of mindset that banks have about how their customers are going to interact with their services, and also how they're potentially, operating and allowing customers, or sort of the kind of customer operation side of the bank. There's a lot of heavy workflows, manual entry, things like that exist because of like some of the regulatory requirements. And so a lot of that could be solved through working with some agentic models. So I think there's huge change. We're kind of calling it out quite early because like we see it coming, and we think it's kind of under discussed right now. When you think about like agentic versus agent, agentic being it's performing actions, right? So if it's performing actions for you, you got to think about your customer experience very differently. So, if you're not providing a kind of agentic experience to your customers, then like we can see all these large tech companies moving towards AI systems. Like we're in a week where Apple just announced and started to push out their Apple Intelligence, which is a layer of intelligence that sits over your phone, right? And in your phone, you have all your data, potentially like you can share all your financial data through that. And then you imagine it's going to be able to find those different applications or different services for you. So you need to really think about how your service is presented and how customers are going to engage with those products. So I think like people aren't really recognizing how big this is going to be. When we think about like financial management apps, like they're not very popular because all they do is show people their finances, kind of what they already know, but with a little bit more fidelity. But if I can show you something about your finances and say, hey, you got to move money from A to B to optimize your finances, a customer might go, cool, and then they might not do it. But if they go, this is what you need to do, move money from A to B, press this button and we'll do it for you. Like, it's so simple. And I think that's what's been missing in financial services. This wave of agents that's come out with these LLMs, they are able to interpret like, as humans, like what do we want to do? And so that interpretation layer, and then they can take that and then push that into platforms so the machine understands like the human input and like what we want to achieve. So they're really important even to the agentic model piece. Where agentic models, what they have is they basically have access to a library of tools. And so what they're able to do is, as I said, like look for opportunities. So your LLM is going to say, okay, what do you want to do? Or what do you want to know about your finances? The agentic model then will have access to maybe transferring funds, maybe signing up to products, maybe paying your friends, or like various different actions, maybe access to different interest-bearing accounts, and so based off of like you might just be able to say to an LLM, which is like an agent, hey, I want to make more of my money, and then it'll be able then to interpret ways to do that through accessing your data, and then it'll turn to the agentic model to go, okay, now go and perform these actions for the customer. And the difference is, conversational UI, which is what we see today, which has been great, then to actually like creating actions and doing things for us. It's like a big change. Yeah, I mean, we're trying to help banks with that today. I mean, like if we think about some of the agentic models we've talked about, they're kind of like, it's pretty risky stuff. If you just look at it off the bat, it's much more risky than, how the apps are running today. I mean, honestly, I'd love to see some of the big banks take some big leaps, but I really think a lot of the fintechs have an opportunity to displace some of the incumbents. The question is whether it's going to be similar to the neobank wave we saw, where like some neobanks, they had better applications, they had sort of more functional backends, they were cloud native, and the banks shifted to that over time. But in that period, the Monzos, the Revoluts of the world, the Chimes, they were able to steal a march and take millions of customers, and now you look at them 10 years on, they're really great, profitable businesses. And so, like, my theory is that like agentic will be similar. There's an opportunity for some entrants to come in. It's a question of how fast the banks will be able to move into that space. The challenge is always like, with the models, you're only as good as your data. And I think Plaid's done a very good job, Plaid, MX, a lot of aggregators here, on getting access to data. But obviously from a consent perspective, there's a lot of drop off in those flows. Where we saw in the UK when we got open banking, which is the same, similar to 1033, because it was just easier, like that app-to-app experience to share data feels native, it feels much more trustworthy, and it is. I think that like allows different types of experiences to exist, and it allows people to move their data more readily around their ecosystem. There's another question in there, like with the US market is very different to the UK market in that customers are far more engaged with their finances. So we saw this huge shift in the UK of how people move their data, and I think that will be exponential here. And this industry is actually very good at leveraging data. Like, you just look around this conference, there are a lot of data companies, a hell of a lot more than exist in Europe. And so I think actually the innovation that we'll see in the US, given that there's some great like research and great AI companies here, the likes of Google and others, this will the US I think is where, I think digitally from a banking experience, we've probably been ahead in the UK. I'm getting the feeling that the US might race ahead. I've been coming to Money20 in Vegas for probably 7 years now. And for the first 5 years of that, we didn't have a business in the US. And so we always came here just to see what was going on, to understand the market, to meet people. So it's very different to be here as someone that's now been in the market for 2 years with customers. It's such a busy conference, everyone is here. Obviously the AI trend is quite something. It's trying to figure out what the implementations are. But I mean, it's been really nice just to meet a bunch of people from the industry. Coming from the UK, you get a good UK cohort coming here. So it's nice to see sort of old friends and colleagues. But yeah, I mean, my big takeaway is that AI is very real. Everyone's tooling up. There's always a question of I see a lot of people ask questions, well, where are the commercial outcomes? And I think that's kind of a naive question, because these implementation cycles, from technology, especially in financial services, 1 year would be good. 2 years is probably, actually doing pretty well. And you add this question where the regulation doesn't really meet with the technology right now. So I think by the time we get next year, we'll see those first real AI experiences coming through. And I'm not talking about just agents, I'm talking about the next wave, the agentic stuff. So it'd be cool to come again next year and see how things have moved on.